So we'll go ahead and just start introducing ourselves. I'm going to go in order, just like with who's on my screen right now. So we'll start with Liliana. Here, the first one on my screen.
Okay. Hi, I'm Liliana. I'm 23. I'm an Aries Sun, Aries Moon, Taurus rising. I do practice astrology and I'm also learning tarot. So that's
Beautiful.
me. I'm a bit of a beginner, but I'm really enjoying so far practicing the beginning stages of applying everything that I'm learning.
Love that. Love that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Jaren on my screen.
Hi, I'm Jaren. I am 26 years old. I'm an Aqua Sun, Virgo Moon, and Capricorn rising. And I'm a practicing, if I can get my words out, astrologer and tarot reader as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Jaren. And then last we have Raina.
Hello, I'm Raina. I have 29 years of being a human on this earth, this go around. I'm an intuitive tarot reader and I am an apprentice astrologer.
Love that. All right, you guys. Thank you for joining me on today's podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Like I said, I'm very grateful to have you guys on here for the first podcast ever. Thank you guys for like taking a chance on this fun like project that I just like came to you guys with, this crazy idea that I just came to you guys with. Thank you for taking a chance on it. I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to see what we get into. So our topics today are going to be apologizing, healing from toxic friendships, sisterhood, and healing when you've done the hurting. And so I want to start off with apologizing because I think there's a lot of power in apologizing. It takes like a very healthy self-esteem and an emotionally intelligent person to apologize. And apologizing is something that's so necessary to maintain a healthy long-term relationship. Yet I feel like a lot of us have never had a great apology like modeled to them. And so that I think is something that we want to like just help people with is there were so many questions I had when I was healing and realizing, hey, I fucked up and I need to apologize. There were so many questions I had, like, how do I apologize? Like, when do I apologize? What do I do if they don't accept my apology? Like, there was just a lot going through my brain, and I'm sure that is happening for other people too. So I hope we can answer some of those questions today. One question I have for you guys is, have you ever received a bad apology?
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
What was that like? Like, what was some of the things that were said?
I feel like one of the quickest things people will say is like, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way." And it's like, "Well, that doesn't make me feel any better and it's not validating my feelings." And then there's nowhere to go from there, like to rectify whatever the issue was. So that one I'm always frustrated with that one.
Right.
That's the first place my mind went as well, is like, I'm sorry
Yeah.
you feel that way. That like completely deflects any sense of responsibility that the quote unquote apologizer has and makes it about like, okay, you feel a way and this is a you problem, and doesn't take any accountability for what they did to like contribute to you feeling that way. So like that's the first thing that comes to mind, and I've gotten a lot of those. I've gotten a lot of I'm sorry you feel that ways.
I feel like that's a very standard bad apology to get because I feel like it's the easiest one for people to use because it's a bit subtle enough of a deflection that it's not so easily seen by some people. Sometimes I think, especially if you don't have a good apology mirrored for you growing up, you don't know how to spot what's good and what's acceptable. So I feel like that's a very easy one for people to use against you, and kind of like Raina was saying, make it a you problem. It makes your emotion the problem of the situation rather than what caused the reaction, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. I've had a bad apology where someone apologized but never said what they did. Like never actually admitted or said what they did. So they didn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like they still deflected. You still like did not take the accountability or anything. You still deflected what you did. But it's just like you tell somebody what they did and you pour your whole heart out and they're just like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry. I messed up." You're like, sorry for what?
Right. Right.
It's such a shallow
yeah.
It's such a shallow apology because like I feel like people think like saying sorry is an apology, and I don't think that that's the case at all. I think
there's
that
an art to an
For sure. An apology has to acknowledge that you understand what you did and what the effect of what you did is on the other person. Like, what did I do wrong and how did that affect you? You need to understand that in order to have an apology that's going to be followed up with accountability. If you don't, of course you're going to repeat that pattern, and then it's not just a mistake, it's a pattern.
Yeah. And
Totally.
I think a big part too with having to take that accountability, because if they don't, then how are they supposed to, not make that same mistake again? Like, there's nothing for, if they just say, okay, I'm sorry, and you move on, then it's going to come up again. There's no way for it not to. So a changed behavior or like a remedy to the is definitely an important a part of an apology to,
for sure.
Ask, okay, how can we make this better and move forward from here? And then not doing the thing that, caused the apology to be needed in the first place.
Yeah. You need an actionable item there. And like, that's like skipping steps too, because like, first of all, acknowledge how the person feels, validate their emotions, and like, even like, just like being like, I'm sorry, that sucks, or like, just like acknowledging that person's inner world and how they're being affected by it. It's like, that should come so much before that, even, where it's like, if all you say is I'm sorry, you've skipped every part of an apology that makes an apology real or honest or valid, right?
Right. And I think too, something that's kind of slept on low key is to like ask if it's okay to apologize. Like, are you in the space to like have that conversation where you might consider forgiving me or not? Like, I've had people hit me up after years of not talking, just trying to apologize. And it's like, I'm like so busy right now. I'm like so worried by other shit. Like, I really can't have this conversation with you right now. So I think it's also like a slept on thing.
Yeah.
I've had that happen.
Time and a place.
Yeah. I've had that happen where, I dated someone and we broke up, and I was completely heartbroken over this guy. I was 19. And after the breakup, he would consistently reach out and make all of these promises and all of these ideas. And eventually I saw it for what it was and started pulling away. And he would continuously reach out up until 3 years after he broke up with me. He was continuously reaching out. And the last time it happened, I told him, it's really unfair of you to keep reaching out when I've like moved on. I've done the healing I've needed to do. You weren't there to apologize for it at the time. And he goes, I'm sorry for everything that happened. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And I said, what do we have to talk about after 3 years? This apology at this point, I've made my closure myself without your apology already, and I made my peace with it. So if you haven't made your peace with it yet, then I invite you to do that on your own. But it was kind of that thing of just this half-assed apology at the wrong time, in the wrong way, that just, it made it completely ineffective. If he would have said something, along the lines of, I wish I would have talked to you about this sooner, and I'm sorry that I didn't, but I'm sorry for X, Y, and Z that I did in this relationship, then it might have been different. But if you don't take the proper steps to creating that apology, then I think it completely just goes over people's heads, because we've already made peace with it,
There's a sense of like self-centeredness implied with that too, where it's like, oh, like, here I am showing up after all this time, like, I'm ready to talk to you if you want that. Like, why would you assume that you're even an object in this person's orbit any longer after that, like, it's like who are you to me now, and why do you think that this is still important in my life? Like, that's almost an like entitled. So I think that's so bizarre for someone to even phrase it that way. Like,
absolutely bizarre.
I'm here to talk if you want after all this time. Like, are you okay?
3 years.
Literally.
Like, if I wanted to talk about what happened, I would have. He's reached out plenty of times via call, friend request, text. His mom and grandma reached out. Like,
oh my God, he had mom and grandma working?
That's doing too much.
Like, if someone wants to have that discussion and someone wants to accept your apology, like, I'm sure you would have known by then if I wanted, so when people do something like that, like Raina said, it applies some sort of self-centeredness, and the apologizer is doing it on their own time, really, and no regard for the person who is affected.
It's really just to like absolve their own guilt at that point, because it's like, this is still weighing on you, and you're trying to take that off of your shoulders and be like, okay, I did the right thing, I'm a good person, like I can move on from this now. And it's like, sometimes that's not how it works, babe.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not.
You made your bed. Lying.
There is a statute of limitations, like.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like another issue that seems to come up is people think time is an apology, and it's not. You know, that just time passing and then they can come back and things are fine. It's like we still have to address, you know, whatever the issue was in order to be able to move forward. And I think I'm not sure what it is of why people don't see it that same way, because some people are like, oh, well, let's just leave the past in the past. It's like, we can do that once we discuss it, then we can move forward. You know, like, you just want to bury something that hasn't been talked about. And I feel like that's just covering up a wound that hasn't even been able, you know, been like disinfected and able to heal properly. And I don't think that works well.
I've definitely had like a reoccurring theme of that happening in my life, where like someone would be like, oh, you're still upset about this, like how have you not forgiven me? And it's like, you've never asked for forgiveness, you've never acknowledged that there was something to forgive in the first place, so why would I go out of my way to forgive you for something you've not acknowledged, let alone asked for forgiveness on? Like, it's another like bizarre assumption.
Yeah.
Well, because it's making this assumption that you have to do all of the work to fix the issue when you were the person affected by it. Oh, you haven't worked through this on your own yet? I don't understand why you haven't. Well, like you said, you haven't even acknowledged it, let alone apologize. I mean, even if you acknowledged it, then maybe I can, you know, accept having to have my closure on my own. But, you know, it makes the person who was affected the responsible party of fixing it.
Right. Love all these points you guys are making. And like, I feel like too, like I get like sometimes it takes people like a little while to like even realize that they have something to apologize for. And it's like, if you're going to come back after a long time and apologize for it, like you do have to acknowledge how much time has passed. That's important, to acknowledge your apology. And that boils back to us being like, you know, you have to ask like, hey, are you in the space to have a conversation about what happened, so that way I could apologize for it. And if that person, you know, like, you know, says no, I think that's important to respect too. And you shouldn't, it shouldn't stop you from changing. Like, because someone doesn't accept your apology, or like they tell you you're too late, it's been too long, like it still shouldn't stop you from like learning the lesson and being a better person.
Right.
Yeah, like I'll see people like get their apologies rejected and they're just like, fine, going back to my old like fuckboy ways. Then it's like, no,
that's not the point.
Not the point. You were never actually sorry then.
The point
that's how you know the intentions behind the apology were wrong in the first place. The intention behind the apology should always be like for the other person. It doesn't matter what the outcome is for you, because then you're apologizing for the wrong reason. If you're apologizing to be forgiven or to regain access to someone or to absolve your own guilt, whatever the case may be, like if it revolves around you, it's not a genuine apology at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I think too, like if somebody is genuine with their apology, they have to understand like it's not like a one conversation and then like all is forgiven. Like you have to like repair a whole relationship. Like you have to follow through on the promises you made. Like you have to literally change and make sure you don't repeat these behaviors that you were like apologizing for. Like I feel like people will say sorry and they'll be like a damn good sorry, and then it's back to normal again, and it's like nothing changed. And then it's like they fuck up again, and then they'll say sorry, and it'll be like a really good sorry. You forgive them, and then like nothing changes. Like there's so much work that follows an apology.
Right.
Yeah. An apology has to be followed by accountability. Otherwise it's just a good apology, you know. It's just, there's no substance behind it. So it's like, okay, you're a smooth talker, you know what to say and how to say it, but then like again, the intention behind the apology is empty, right? Because there's no follow through, there's no accountability that comes with that.
Right.
I also think there's something worth noting about the person being apologized to. They can accept the apology, but maybe it doesn't go back to the way it was right away because they need to rebuild this trust. They need to rebuild this connection with you after maybe facing some sort of betrayal. I think it's important for the person apologizing to understand that there's a certain level of processing that's needed for those emotions that the person has to deal with and resolve in order to accept a person's apology. So sometimes that takes more time than I think some people are willing to give. And I think that can also cause a bit of an issue. I mean, when I was a kid and my mom would apologize to me about something that we would fight about, if I wasn't immediately back to my chipper self right after, it would become an issue because why aren't you immediately fine? Well, now that the situation's over, I need time to process. So I think some people don't always realize that with apologizing, there's processing time needed for that also.
1,000%. And like, you better go into your apology like knowing that too. Like, like you have to go into this apology being fully ready to like be a patient person, give the relationship its time, and be okay with whatever the relationship is, like letting go of the expectations of what it was, which is crazy because I think a lot of people apologize so that way it can go back to the way it was.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. They want it to go back to before, you know, whatever event took place, but really you just have to, it happened, you can't change it, so you do have to acknowledge that and then you just move forward from that point.
I think also that like it's important to acknowledge as the apologizer that like no healing is linear and it could be volatile. It could require you to be an active participant in this person's healing, or it could require you to like back off and give that person space. Like just because you apologize and that apology is accepted doesn't mean that the event or whatever happened didn't happen. So like there could be moments where that person needs to reprocess some anger. There could be moments where like someone revisits that and finds that there's something else that they were disturbed by, or something, some other emotions come up, and like that's part of being a human who's healing from something that hurt them, right? And like I think one thing that I've also noticed is like people will have these amazing apologies, and then if you are to bring up the event that sparked the apology later on, they could be like, well, I apologized about that, so like why are you bringing it up? And it's like it's probably because it's pertinent to what that person is feeling in that moment, and it's probably because whatever you're talking about in that moment has like triggered that wound to be reopened, right?
It's a wound somewhere. I mean, it doesn't just disappear because an apology was there. I think we can all think back to so many instances that we were apologized to for, but that situation still sticks with us, and it might cause us to react in some way, like putting a wall up around our hearts, or not wearing our hearts on our sleeve as much, or not trusting people as openly, you know? So those wounds come out in different ways. So I think it's unfair to assume that just because you apologized, it automatically disappears into an abyss of forgotten memories.
That's the thing is an apology is not an eraser. It does not turn back time. It is a band-aid or stitches at best, but there is going to be a scar. Like the wound happened, right?
Yeah. So like just to like recap a little bit of what we've talked about, tell me if I'm missing anything, but like a good apology is one that would acknowledge maybe like what that person did wrong. It would show like remorse and empathy. It would also acknowledge maybe how much like time has passed. They would want to be there for the right intentions. And I think a genuine apology too like has a resolution, or it has like a game plan, or it has like just like, yeah, I would just say a game plan of like, this is how I'm going to do better for you. And I think too, like that is the most important part of the apology is the actual like game plan, that
the
is
action item. That's what I call it.
of that. And then we also said that a good apology is an ongoing conversation. It does not stop at I'm sorry. It's an ongoing conversation. And it's important for like the people to stick to their promises and to help people heal, like from how, like to help you heal from the thing that they did to you, I guess is like the way I would say that, from the thing that they did to you, whether that's like helping you actively or like backing off. Is there anything you guys wanted to add to that, or do you think I kept up with what you guys
I think that sums it up pretty well.
Pretty good.
So I guess my next question would be, what are what do you think are some things that get in the way of people apologizing? Like if somebody wants to, but like they haven't yet, or if somebody feels like they should and they haven't yet, like what are these things that get in the way that stop people from apologizing?
I think guilt and shame.
Shame.
And also pride and ego can play a big part in it also, I think, depending on the situation and depending on how willing you are to face what you might have done to someone. You know, you might feel bitter about the fact that you did this to someone, and it might be because it, you know, you have to admit to yourself that you did something wrong and that hurts your pride, you know? So just things like that. I think those main four kind of come to mind.
Right.
Yeah. I think those things are so entangled too. I think like pride and ego are allergic to guilt and shame. Like they do not want to be made to feel that way, and they don't want to be made to feel small. They don't want to be made to feel flawed. And like anytime those kinds of feelings come up in someone, I think that those are like major indicators of like an inner child wound too, where it's like you take this action that you did or this thing that you said, this mistake that you made, and you take it to mean something about you that you can't face. And then you delay taking action on resolving that, because then you would have to face it and you're just not there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think with the as far as the taking accountability, it's hard, and people, you know, they feel attacked as far as their character. They don't, like you said, want to feel like bad people. What was I going to say? And then another issue that I see is sometimes people generally don't feel they did anything wrong. They are not able to look at things like from the other person's perspective and to see how that relationship might have been damaged, how the other person might have been hurt. So then they don't want to apologize because in their mind there was nothing wrong. And so I think that's, you know, when you have people that you really do care about, that you want to be in their lives, and especially over a long term to make a relationship work, you have to be able to recognize you're not always going to be the nicest and best person. You're not always going to, you know, make the right choices as far as how you handle things with somebody. And so if you do want that relationship to last, especially over, you know, a lifetime, you have to be able to sit back sometimes and say, okay, maybe that thing I did wasn't right. But that's yeah, the biggest thing that I get from a lot of people is they feel they didn't do anything wrong, so they have nothing to apologize for. And then it just kind of leaves it at that, because if they can't even acknowledge how they made the other person feel or anything beyond that, then it's like, okay, well, where are we supposed to go from here, you know?
Right. I think also that people get really stuck on the like right or wrong part of that situation, where they're like, well, I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't say anything wrong, or I was just telling the truth, or like you know, they get stuck on like the logistics of it. And it's like, you don't have to have done something wrong to have hurt somebody, and and you don't have to say that you did something wrong in order to acknowledge that you did something that harmed someone. You know what I mean? You can genuinely empathize with someone's perspective on how what you said was hurtful to them without internalizing it and having it be something you did wrong or even a mistake that you made. Everyone needs to be interacted with in different ways. Everyone has lived different lives. We all have different things that affect us differently. And something that like you could tolerate someone saying to you, maybe that person is not okay with having that said to them, you know, and that's fine. You know, we're all different people.
Yeah. Have you guys ever received a good apology before?
Yeah.
How did that like affect you and the relationship moving forward?
I think it was like really bizarre to me. I was almost like dumbfounded. Like I was pretty like wow. I honestly like didn't really have words, because it was like the first time I had ever been like genuinely apologized to. And I was so ready to fight. I was so ready to defend myself. I was so ready to make myself big, to stand my ground, to dig in my heels and be like, you know, like just ready to fight that battle that you fight with everyone who doesn't know how to apologize, right? And I was just like, okay then. And I kind of like deflated like a balloon, and I was just like, oh, well, do you want to just chill then? Like I was just fine after that. But yeah, it was like definitely a big moment for me. And like I was like, wow, like okay, so like I'm not difficult, I'm not too picky. There is something that can genuinely appease me, because I'd been made to feel like that wasn't possible before, right? And I think that a lot of people who like are toxic apologizers, for lack of a better phrase, try to like imply that you are difficult to appease, or that like no kind of apology would really work for you, but that's not the case. You just have to genuinely apologize.
I think it shows too how much like healing can come from someone giving you a good apology. Like the fact that you're like, see, I knew I wasn't like made to be like impossible to appease and stuff like that. Like it really probably helped you heal
hugely, for sure.
So powerful. Yeah. It really goes to show how powerful apologies are. And I think one of the reasons maybe people don't apologize is that they think it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, for sure. And it's like, no, like apologies can go a really, really long way. Like also karmically too, and apologies can go a really, really long way. In a sense where it can really help close that door and like give people closure, give people healing. Love that. Have any of you guys like received a good apology, or have you given one? Like, have you had to give an apology before?
Yeah. I have, yeah.
Me too.
I definitely have. I think we all have had to apologize at some point, but I think honestly over the last like 2 years, I would say, is when I really genuinely learned how to apologize. And it was because it was such a big thing in my relationship over the last couple of years, where it was like we struggle to like reconnect after these like moments of erosion, after these like wounds, and we were like, what's the missing piece here? And it kind of came together that we were just not apologizing effectively. And learning to apologize has been the difference between like bad blood for days, if not weeks, and like these permanent erosions, versus like moving on within a matter of minutes, and like being comfortable with reopening the conversation if it needs to be reopened. But a lot of the time, just smooth sailing from there. Like a good apology goes such a long way, and it's hard. It sucks. You have to really like literally physically shut the lips of your ego, put baby in the corner, and be like, okay, we need to just do it.
Yeah.
It's
hard, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, I've had to so obviously, you know, everybody they can be on both sides of things. You know, you get bad apologies, you give some. So I've definitely had my times too where I'm like, oh well, sorry, I'm such a piece of shit, like you know, and that's kind of turning it into about myself though. You know, it's not acknowledging whatever the actual issue is, because I'm in defense mode at that time, and I'm feeling like I have to, you know, defend myself when really it doesn't need to be that deep. But yeah, it's definitely hard to give a good apology, to acknowledge, okay, maybe I didn't do or say the right thing. And that's my biggest thing in my relationship, is like how I talk to other people, because a lot of other times I didn't care. I can be very mean and ugly sometimes, honestly. And so when it comes to people, when they, I guess, push me past a certain point or whatever, then I'll say things, and I don't want to apologize too, because I meant what I said. So that's a big thing I had to learn, was, okay, I need to stop saying certain things, because I'm not, like I said, I meant it at that time. I don't have nothing to apologize for. So just stop saying it, you know, learn to interact with people in a different way, because I don't want people coming and talking to me crazy, and then I'm going to feel some type of way, you know, about accepting their apology too, because then what, the next time we get into it, it's going to come out again. So it really takes looking at yourself, and I think focusing on, you know, like I said, the relationship, if you want to make that work, you have to set those things aside for yourself, to say, okay, I need to, you know, put my big girl panties on and apologize, and then we move forward, and it doesn't have to turn into all that ugliness. And because too, I've learned, you know, when things get so ugly and all these words are exchanged and people putting hands on each other and all these things, you can't come back from a lot of that. Like you can't, like I said, you can't unsay things. You can apologize, but it's only going to go so far. So I think learning to carry yourself in a different way as well as you grow, taking those lessons with you forward, even if it's with different people, to not carry those same things so that you're not constantly having to apologize to different people for the same things that you've done. Like, you gotta learn and then just move differently from that.
Yeah. At some point you have to acknowledge when you're the common denominator. Like if you keep ending up in situations where like you blow up, like at that point, that's when you have to really look at yourself and be like, okay, like it's not these individual occurrences that just so happen to be the same. It's me. I am the problem. And like I really admire that you acknowledge that like you can get ugly in those situations. And I feel like that's a really difficult thing to admit. And I know that I too have a line where it's like once I cross it, all of those like restrictions that I place on myself to be a good person, to be a good communicator, like that hat is off. And now it's primal, it's instinctual, it's survival mode, and it's ugly as fuck. And like I learned that even in that situation, I am the problem. Barring an abusive situation where I'm pushed to that level, I need to have my boundaries strong enough that if I'm getting to that point, I need to remove myself from that situation.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to remove myself from that relationship because it's not a safe place for me. But at the end of the day, it is my responsibility to keep myself from getting to a point that I can't come back from.
And I like that you put it that way, that it's our responsibility to do that for ourselves, because we can swear up and down, you know, they did this, they made me do this, but no, they didn't. Like they can stir up those, you know, feelings of anger and whatever else, but at the end of the day, we control our bodies and our mouths, so we
it's really what you do with it.
Yeah,
it's really what you do with those emotions that come up. I mean, I can think of a lot of times, and I'll probably reference my mom a lot in this conversation because we had a turbulent relationship growing up, and we argued a lot, we butt heads a lot. And I noticed in myself that I would say some pretty cruel things, right? And it sucks to admit that you can be a cruel person sometimes. It's just like, sometimes it can feel really defeating to say I can be, you know, I can say,
like it's not easy to know that that's how some people have seen me, or that's the image of me that they might carry with them, you know, especially if we're not on speaking terms anymore or whatever it may be. So
and it sucks to do that to someone else, but like if we are to center it around ourselves, it also sucks to have those things that like those shame spirals and those guilt spirals that like really contradict the person that you're trying so hard to become. And like it brings you back into that inner child wound, and it brings you back into like, oh, I'm a shit person, or like you know, I'm unworthy, or I'm this, or I'm that. And like the effect that it has on yourself too is just you don't want to be in a situation where you do that to yourself, right? You don't want to create opportunities for you to reinforce and reinflict these wounds on yourself. So like I feel like it's such a major part of growth to learn how to set boundaries with people and with yourself, honestly, where you're not recreating these patterns in relationships and recreating these patterns of how you view yourself after the fact.
I think too that like society can be like a little bit addicted to like suffering, and like we'll call that justice. So like we'll fuck up and then we'll be like, I don't deserve shit. Like I don't deserve shit. I don't deserve a relationship. Like I deserve to suffer, and we call that justice. And it's like that's not justice either. You know, that doesn't like heal anybody either. But I definitely,
it's self-punishment.
Basically, that's a good way to put it. And I've so my relationship with my mom is kind of the same way, and she has essentially messed up her relationships with all me and my three siblings, so it's four of us all together, in different ways, to the point where like we've not spoken to her at different times, and we've come to see things a bit differently, you know, try to be understanding of the things that she went through and whatever else. But the way I've seen that play out with her, as far as being somebody who thinks they've done no wrong, and as a parent too, it's a bit difficult because, you know, you try your best. And so that's one thing that I've struggled with. Like, okay, she might have tried her best, but it wasn't enough. Like, I'm sorry, but that we have to acknowledge that too. But she is somebody that I feel like carries all of that with her, and to the point, as you know, she's getting older, and it's shown very much in her body. And like I've learned how connected, you know, our minds and bodies are into our emotions, and how carrying all these things, like it's literally degenerated her physical body. And She's told me before, like, that she cries herself to sleep at night almost every night because of these things that so it'll be like she carries the guilt and shame of these things, but on the other hand, she thinks she did no wrong. She doesn't want to apologize for these things. And it makes it difficult to continue, you know, having a relationship, because for me, I'm like, I want to discuss these things, you know, regardless of whether it was 20, almost 30 years ago. I want to talk about things, but that's not how everybody, you know, is able to move forward. But it is, people have to be able to process things. And so I see it's really hard for her, you know, having to be somebody that's done certain things and, you know, emotionally abusive or whatever it is to other people, and not acknowledge that. And then you have that weighing on you for your whole entire life. And it's like, that's not what we wanted for her. Like, we want, you know, the acknowledgement of the issues, and so we can move forward. But I don't know if it's just a different mental state, or, you know, how past generations viewed things, that we just sweep things under the rug, you move forward, you don't talk about it. And that's supposed to be the healing part. But it's like, that doesn't work. And clearly it hasn't worked if she's still carrying, you know, these things with her to this day. So yeah, it's really important. I think if you care about people, have those difficult conversations. Like, it's not going to be easy, but you don't want that to weigh on yourself for the rest of your life, that, you know, feeling like you're such a shit person, like you don't deserve anything. And it's just been a bit sad seeing, you know, the men she's accepted into her life and whatever, as a result of all of these things. And it, you know, all started out for so many years for her, you know, things since she was a child and whatever. But yeah, when it comes to, I like to call it like a code of conduct, like how you carry yourself. And that'll be regardless of what anybody else is doing. You have to figure out how you're going to carry yourself. And then whenever you act, you know, outside of your code of conduct, own up to it. And then you can keep, instead of having, you know, those moments of erosion or whatever, build it back up so that you can maintain a strong relationship that you're able to move forward with, instead of just breaking it down repeatedly till it's nothing.
This is like kind of relevant to what you were saying, but it just like popped into my mind. The other day I saw, I think it was a tweet, and it was along the lines of, some people are put on this earth to show you what happens if you don't do the work. And that is their karma. And like, and that like really hit home for me, because I realized like I have this sense of like urgency for my mom and for the people that hurt me, and like this feeling of like, I see your potential, I see what could happen for you if you figure it out, and like I can help you do that. But some people are just not going to do the work, and you have to take that guilt off your own shoulders, right? You have to like, again, it's about your own boundaries, what you're willing to tolerate and what you're willing to allow to happen to you, right? And it's like, sometimes you have to accept that like that is somebody's journey. And honestly, if we all saw everyone doing the work and being happy and blah blah blah, there would be no karmic cycles. There would be no healing to be done. Like there would be no balance, and like we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So like it is the nature of the world. Some people are going to struggle from the prison of their minds making until they die, and like it is what it is, right? They had every opportunity to do the work just like we did.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that.
I like to call all those types of people the anti-role model. Like, yeah, you're
not to do.
Yeah, there's like the role model, and that's like, all right, that's the potential. And then there's the anti-model, and it's like, that's what's gonna happen if you don't get it together. It's like a straight type thing. And I think that's kind of crazy how like for so many of us, that's like our mom, or for so many of us that's like our big sister, or like our whatever. I know I definitely scared my little sibling straight being like the oldest one. I know they definitely have to learn from my mistakes, and they definitely looked at me and said, see what happens if you don't like, I know I for sure scared my sibling straight. But it's like kind of like interesting how like, you know, that anti-role model, you're right, it's just as necessary, and it's just as healing in its own way. And it's kind of just depends on the perspective you want to live in, right? You can either really see that anti-role model, or you could see it as a really big lesson.
And it's funny that you say that, because I have actually people in my life, in my family, who I've maybe not labeled anti-role model, but they fit into that role, and I've conceptualized them as that in my head as, well, my parents' relationship is not a relationship I wish to mirror in my life. So this is going to be a role model for what I don't want to do. And that's how I then make those decisions on how to move forward in my relationships as best as I can with the knowledge that I have on how to fix it. And, you know, with the work that we do. But, you know, there are just some people I think in our lives that you see them and you see that they're just not going to do the work until they decide to do the work, and they might not ever. And so there's just that some sort of acceptance in that, where you have to stop feeling guilty for not being able to help them out of it.
Yeah.
I would also love to get your opinions and, you know, input on the other end of apologizing, which is like forgiving, right? You hear all the time, you know, in order to heal, like you need to forgive, or you'll hear the opposite end of like, you don't need to forgive, you only have to forgive yourself. Like, blah, blah, blah. There's definitely like that tear, or like not that tear, but just that split where people are like, you have to forgive in order to heal, or you don't have to forgive. Forgiveness is just for the self to move on and blah, blah, blah. And I would love to know what you guys, you know, think about that and where you guys stand on that.
So as somebody who's been through several years of different types of abuse, forgiveness is something that I've struggled with, and maybe in that context it doesn't even matter, but some people do like have applied that to me as well, that I should forgive these people so that I'm and I struggle to like with, for one, understanding what does that even mean, you know, because obviously it's not a condoning of the behavior, it's not saying it was okay, I get that part. So I was like, okay, does it just mean letting go of, you know, the hurt or the hatred or the anger that I had in my heart for these people? And trying to figure out, because I'm like, okay, it doesn't, like I said, doesn't mean I have to accept them into my life or anything of that nature. But some people would phrase it like that you can't truly move on or whatever if you don't forgive. And I'm like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because why should I have to give forgiveness for these things that happened to me? Like, I want to be able to move on with my life just as much, you know, like to pick up the pieces of whatever, you know, I have left and move on with that. But I don't know. That's something I've struggled with a lot, honestly.
I definitely agree in a sense where there are some things I think that like are unforgivable, you know, things like, you know, violence, assault, you know, murder, things like that you don't have to forgive. And the T is there are people out here who have traumas like that, really tough, hard, heavy traumas like that. And you want to tell them like you can't move on unless you forgive. It really backs that person into a corner. And I think, yeah, there are some stuff. Well, what I like to say is it's like, it's not up to me to forgive. It's up to God to forgive them at that point. It's not, it's like too big for my human heart. That's on you and your higher self. That's on you and whatever God you want to believe in. And it's up to them to forgive you, because I'm going to put that on me. As someone who has had to heal from like assault and abuse and things like that, I also struggled with that as well. And yeah, I think it's important to make sure that like you don't back up like the person who is trying to heal like into a corner.
Right. Because I think that, kind of like you were saying, there are certain things that are just unforgivable, and I think that what's included in that list depends on person to person. So if, you know, something happens to a friend of mine, and for me this would be something that's easy to forgive, but maybe they have past experiences with this where they just know it's not something that they're able to handle and, you know, process in that way. I like how you described it as kind of backing them into a corner, because it does feel that way. This is my only option for healing, my only option for moving on, my only option for building something better. That doesn't always feel like the best route to take, because there are just some things that don't fit into what you're willing to forgive. There are just some things that to you won't ever be fixed by an apology.
Yeah. And that was my biggest thing, was like, how can I forgive people that aren't even sorry? But that's why it just got explained to me in the way of it being for yourself and not even for that other person. Just so that you don't have to carry that on your heart and your mind anymore as you move forward from it. And I'm like, well, that's about the best I can get from that. I don't know.
The thing that like I've come to understand about like what people mean when they say like forgiveness is for yourself is that like forgiveness is equivalent to like the attachment you have to the pain. So like when I interact with my mom today, I know that I still have a lot of forgiveness that I need to work through, because that attachment to that pain shows up in our day-to-day conversations. It shows up in projection. It shows up in overreacting to things that are actually completely normal that she's saying, but it brings up something in me, right?
Yeah.
It brings up some kind of past pain or some past wound that likely came from like stems from our relationship. And like that's how I know I still have to work on that element of forgiveness, is the attachment. But there are like relationships that I have where, you know, that person has hurt me and I've released that attachment to them, and that's how I know I've like genuinely forgiven them, because those things don't come up. And when the painful moment comes up, it comes up as like a regular memory with no emotional weight really attached to it that exists in the present day. So like I feel like that's what people are kind of like alluding to when they say like forgiveness is for yourself.
I love that you describe it like that, because that's what it feels like when you have to forgive someone without an apology or without them there to help you through it. It does sort of feel like, how can I process this in a way where I can detach myself and not brush it under the rug and ignore the emotions, but actually work through it and be able to then leave it behind. So I really like how you worded it that way, because it does feel sort of like detachment rather than forgiveness. Sometimes it's just a matter of being able to process that this happened and now I'm learning to be okay with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think too, I really love what you guys are saying, by the way. You guys are making really great points. And one thing I think too is like there's different types of forgiveness. Like there's options. Like you don't have to just like fully forgive somebody. Like you can partially forgive someone and like that's valid. Or you can forgive someone like with conditions and that's valid. Like or you could fully absolve someone from everything they did too and just full on forgive them. That's also valid. Like I think that's important for people to know, is that there's a spectrum to forgiveness that you can fall on, and you can choose which one you think is comfortable for you right now. And I think forgiveness too is one of those things that happens like over and over again, just the same way an apology is conversation. Like forgiveness is, you have to sometimes forgive the same person over and over again as you get re-triggered and they're trying to like change that so they don't trigger you anymore, and then you have to like you know, work through it together. So yeah, I definitely think that there is different levels to forgiveness. And definitely the one for me, you know, having to, like I said, I had one of my abusers literally apologize and like take ownership. And for me, like that person is on like maybe conditional forgiveness right now. Like I can forgive you, but under these like conditions that you really gotta stick by, you know. Whereas like if my like, brother is saying, sorry, I stole your cardigan, but I'm not getting it back, but I'm sorry I stole the cardigan. Fine, it's fine. Full forgiveness. Cardigan now, bitch.
Whatever.
Like,
we're detaching.
This is a very specific now. Story. I feel like this happens.
Tell me why that man pulls up to my house in my cardigan. In the cardigan.
I knew it. I'm like, that's way too specific.
I was shook. I was like, you're kidding. That's where it
so
was.
Funny.
It's so funny. I was like, no, he didn't. But yeah, so it was very specific, yes. But
it's true. It goes back to like what we were talking about with apologizing as well, where it's like an apology being accepted doesn't mean that things are going to go back to the way that they were before. And I think forgiveness is like the other side of that coin, where it's like you're just the other person in the equation, right? Like you can forgive someone and then know that you need specific boundaries in place that you might not have had if that wound was not created. And like I don't think that comes from attachment. I think that comes from just switching your boundaries around and like learning a lesson, honestly. Like until that person can prove that they are no longer a threat in that manner again, it's a safe and sane thing to do to put up that boundary.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't forgive them.
Right. Yeah. And you were talking about how we can we were kind of talking about like false like apologies. I think there's also like false forgiveness where you tell somebody, all right, I forgive you, but deep down inside, you really don't forgive them. And you are like trying to convince yourself that you do forgive someone, and in reality, you haven't. And I definitely see this a lot for like, personal relationships where you do love the person, but they're just fucking up. You know what I mean? Like, so I can see like false forgiveness come in that way. And I've definitely experienced like false forgiveness for like, some of my tougher relationships that I have. Like I also have my mom and our relationship's definitely on the tougher side. And there have been times where I definitely am like, all right, I forgive you, but I'm like so bitter in the end. And I think that is just like, you almost like don't believe that they could change in a way, or there's so many reasons to that, honestly, but it's kind of just like, or you almost like don't want to deal with it in a way either. But that's also, I think, really unhealthy. And I think that also maybe can even stem from a little bit of like survivor like silence too, where you're kind of like, I've made it through, so I'm just gonna stay quiet. Like yeah, there can be that. I'm just gonna say it's okay and like stay quiet and like try not to like respark the flame. So
as a person who like suffers from like attachment wounds from like neglect and abuse as a kid, like there is something to be said about like being apologized to and then having integrity with being honest about how that apology makes you feel and where you're at with processing it, because there's a part of me that immediately wants to accept the bare minimum. There's a part of me that immediately wants to accept an apology, even a bad one, and pretend that I'm not feeling the feelings that I am, and just be like, yeah, I forgive you, and pretend to be normal, but I'm still carrying this like bitterness because I haven't processed it. Because even if the apology was genuine, maybe I haven't processed it. Maybe I still am working through those difficult emotions. And it got to a situation where like I was also behaving in toxic ways, because when shit hit the fan, I was bringing up, well, you did this and you did this and you did this and you did this, and it wasn't in like it wasn't from good intentions. It wasn't from like, I need to process this. It was really just me not being and like being in my integrity, and I had been dishonest essentially about where I was at emotionally with that process. So like it's really tough to like walk that line too, because it's scary to tell someone like, I don't accept your apology. It's scary to say like, I appreciate your apology, but I need time. It's scary to say like, hey, I know we talked about it and I was cool, but like things are coming up for me again. It's hard to do that, but I think that it's important to do it anyway, even though it is hard.
Yeah. I think the fear with that comes from, okay, obviously like there's an uncertainty of how the other person will respond. So you try, it's like a survivor thing, I guess, like you trying to predict the outcomes and to do things in a way that you feel like you have control of the situation and you know what's going to happen. So then when things don't go that way, then you're kind of like, well, shit, what am I supposed to do, you know? And then I think with, I don't know, it kind of sucks because like to forgive, like that requires a lot of work on the person doing the forgiving. They have to process all that. They have to be open with themselves, to honor themselves and be honest about how they're feeling. And then it's like with the other person, I guess the fear of what if they're okay, so they come, you know, apologize to you, you say, I need more time, or this is what I need in order to be able to accept this. And what they're like, well, fuck that, like I don't want to do, then it's like you're in a position where you have to either say, okay, I can't be in this relationship anymore, or like that you have to be without that person because you didn't accept the apology when they gave it or whatever. And it's just hard, especially like for me, I don't have many people. I've never had like a lot of friends. I have my siblings, my grandma, and like very few people outside of that. So then when these things happen, like I can't just be quick to cut everybody off because then I'll have nobody. Like I'll be by my damn self. So it's hard to know like, okay, what's the situations that's worth working through with somebody, and when it is a situation that you need to dead because it's not, you know, like you're not getting your needs met, it's not effective in any way. It's a struggle for real.
So I absolutely drive myself insane thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because it's so true, but I see the pattern in it. And I see that a lot of the people who are in my life that I'm afraid of losing in that capacity, it's because they haven't grown into a person I can trust. There's a fundamental lack of trust in that relationship where I can't feel safe showing up authentically in my emotions because I know that that's a risk to the relationship, and I have to either accept that or lose them or risk losing them because they can't handle me if I'm authentic in my emotions. And that's not a me problem, that's a them problem. But it becomes a me problem when I have to like toe that line of, do I sacrifice my integrity? Do I sacrifice myself essentially? Do I make a martyr out of myself to accept this person who doesn't actually accept me? Right. And it's like, at the end of the day, who will I have left at the end of the day? Probably no one. But like, I'm getting closer to becoming comfortable with that, because I think that, like, just to go back to like when I was authentically apologized to, that healing snowballed in me learning how to authentically apologize. And I think that like when you continue to do things like that and you continue to choose your integrity and choose yourself, people are awestruck by it the same way that I was awestruck by that, right? And like, you start to not only find people who vibrate that way, but also shock people into knowing that that's a possibility for them too, right? So even in these relationships where like, you know, I don't always feel the safest, I try my hardest to show up as myself, and I try my hardest to apologize effectively, even if I don't think that that's something they could reciprocate. I try my hardest to use my like best communication skills, even if I know that they're not capable of reciprocating that, because part of it is like, is the hope that like it'll stick for them, that they'll learn something through it, that they'll learn that they can also show up authentically and safely without ego, without, you know, being self-absorbed or being afraid that like they have to face that inner child wound. We all have to eventually if we want to grow, right? But like, it's hard. It's really hard to think about that, and I think about it a lot, but it's getting harder and harder to ignore as I find myself like growing, where it's like, yeah, I am going to outgrow a lot of people. I am going to outgrow a lot of relationships, and I have to make peace with that if I want to continue to grow.
It's hard to admit to yourself when you're noticing that you're starting to get ahead of people in that way, because you realize eventually I have to accept, either I detach from certain expectations I have from these people and I can keep them in my life, or it comes to that point of there are just certain aspects of these people where maybe you can't keep them in your life. The growth that you facilitated just does not align with the place that they've stayed at. So I think that can be a really hard thing to go through and have to process, especially when you can see it with foresight. You know, you can see ahead and you can see the current trajectory that I'm on, and the current trajectory that these people are on are just not the same. You know, we're going, and eventually we're going to intersect and just keep going opposite ways. And that sometimes there's just no way to stop that, I think.
Yeah. I think that's also one of like the like primary reasons why people stop their growing. Like, I think that's one of the places people very often get stuck, and it's just like this like terrifying reality that like if I grow out of the person that I am today, that the people around me love and accept in quotations, then I no longer fit in their lives, and they no longer fit in mine, you know? And it's like, you have to realize that the things that you have to grow out of, if you do grow out of them and they no longer align with you, it's because they were aligning with parts of you that were not authentic. And they were parts of you that allowed them to either take advantage of you in some way or exploit your boundaries, or they got something out of it. They got something out of you being this lower vibration version of yourself. And that in and of itself is so hard to reconcile with. And even that is sometimes not enough for you to be like, okay, well, got to do it anyway. Sometimes you're just like, well, I don't want to lose them though. Like, that's scary. That's so much change. And I don't have the answers, just the questions. You know?
lots of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the questions I have, is at what point do you start to realize, like, how do I even word it? like I was having a conversation with my mom about my uncle or her brother and how he just doesn't do certain things that she wishes that he did in terms of maybe emotional connection or emotional availability as siblings. And I told her, well, if you want him to stay in your life and you want to keep, seeing your brother, you know, sometimes you might have to detach from some of these expectations if you know that he's just not going to give it to you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what you guys think about that, if that's something that you also have thought about, or that's something that you consider in these kinds of situations. But I told her, I said, it's either you remove him from your life and quit giving him access to keep doing these things and feeling this way, or you detach from the expectations that he's ever going to change, and you can be in peace knowing that you are living truly to yourself, and that then you can adjust accordingly to this person and how you interact with this person in your life and how much leeway you give them in your life.
I think a lot of the time it's a much simpler equation than we actually realize, and it's just hard to face because of the emotional repercussions of it. But it really comes down to like, why am I expecting this person to be anyone other than they have proven themselves to be? And what is it about accepting them as they are that threatens me somehow?
Yeah.
Like, why am I shifting my reality to see who I want them to be instead of who they are? And a lot of the time, the gap there is like unmet needs that you have, and you don't know who you want to fill them. Like, you've just projected these needs onto this person and you expect them to fill them, and they're not. But like, in order to break that down, of course, that you have to like face, okay, one, I have unmet needs. Two, does this person actually even fit in my life if they're not meeting those needs? Like, what do I do then? Because your entire relationship with that person changes when you no longer expect that from them. And what you do for that person might change. And that also means how you feel about yourself might change, because if you, for example, are a people pleaser, and that's something you're recovering from, and you start realizing, wow, you have a lot of unmet needs, and that's why you've been attached to people's potential in relationships, let's say romantic relationships, for example, and those people are not meeting your needs, but you've been overpouring into them. So now you're at the point where you're like, okay, this person is not meeting my needs, and I've been viewing them as their potential and not the person that they are. So that's one thing. And then two, okay, well, it no longer makes sense energetically for me to pour into them the way that I have if I'm not being poured back into. And then three, what does this change about me and how I view myself? Because I'm no longer that person who gives a lot. I'm no longer known as that person who's so loving and who's so kind and who's so caring and takes care of everyone before themselves, And it's like, the math is easy, but dealing with it is not.
How do you reconcile with those changes?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile with those new labels and new pieces of identity? It's hard. I think it can get really difficult to navigate sometimes if you're not prepared to navigate it fully.
Yeah. My so as far as with my relationship with my mom, my significant other helped me to see things a bit differently, because I was, and still am, very hurt about all the unmet needs I have from when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. And feeling like, okay, obviously, like I want my mom to be in my life, but with all the problems that we've had and not addressing them and trying, like, feeling like I have to let things go in order to move forward with her, to keep her in my life. It was hard for me. And then too, an issue, okay, because she is still her. So then when she does present things, that it's just like, it just takes me back. And then I'm going off like, listen, all these other things she done, bringing up the past again. And my significant other is like, well, do you want a relationship with her or not? Like, are you going to be able to let go of those past things and move forward or not? And the way that he put it to me was, she's not the mom you want, but she's the one you got. And I'm like, good point. Like, I can't, I have my grandma as somebody else that has stepped in, but at the end of the day, she doesn't replace my mom. Nobody is ever going to replace that. So I looked at things a lot different, because me and my mom have exchanged words, all these things. Like, I genuinely used to have a hatred for her, where I did not want to speak to her. I didn't want my kids to ever know who this woman was. And I'm like, that's not what I want at the end of the day. I want my mom. I want my, kids to have a grandma. Like, I love my grandma to death. I want them to be able to enjoy that. Regardless of what she was to me, I want them to have that. And I don't want to take that away from them. And it really, like, having that conversation with him changed the way I move forward with her. I start telling her I love you back, because I'm like, I don't want my kid, to tell me they fucking hate me and all these things. Like, I don't, even though if it might have been warranted by the things she's done, I'm just like, that's not what I want for my mom. I don't want to make her feel like shit. I don't want her carrying all these things, to her grave. Like, I don't want her to live feeling like she has to be punished forever. So yeah, looking at it that way, like, she's not the one I want, but she's what I got. And it's brought a different level of acceptance. And then, also just like you were saying, Liliana, like, removing those expectations of what I had, of what a mother should be, looking at other people's moms, and I'm like, what? Like, mine ain't nothing like that. Like, what the heck? And I have to accept that at the end of the day. She might not be certain things, but she's other things, and I have to accept her as she is if I want to have that relationship with her. And so I think it's hard too, because obviously those needs I have, they're still unmet. They're all, I can't go back to my childhood and change that. I just have to change it within myself now to address those things and remedy it now, basically. But it helped me to move forward with her in a different way, to where I felt like more so that I could let go of things without having to talk about it. Because like I said, just past generations' view of having those difficult conversations is so different. And I don't know, it just doesn't, seem like it's going to get anywhere. So I'm like, that's just what I have to do to be able to move forward and still have some relationship with my mom, for the time that we do have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been in like 3 like throughout my spiritual journey, and me just like constantly changing and redoing myself. And I had a lot of work to do. Like, I really started like in the gutters, like with complete low vibrational Cancer and Scorpio energy, like in the gutters, completely had to transform that. And so of course, since so much change happened, a lot of my relationships have changed too. And I've been in situations where like I changed and I ascended and I never saw certain people again. I've been in situations where I changed and I ascended and I accepted the fact that, I'm going to have to let go of expectations in order to maintain a relationship with people. And for that relationship, there really is this like underlying tone of like, we are in different worlds. We are in different worlds. And I like remove the expectation. I'm going to make it work. I'm just going to love you for you and whatever. But like, yeah, it feels lonely still. And it's like, it's not the same as when you were kind of like vibrating at the same vibration as they were at one point. And then I've also been in the situation, and this is like pretty recent, where like I started to come out my shell more, like be me more. And I was very scared because I'm like, okay, like these people have known me for a couple years but they don't really know me. And I'm really just letting them, see it now. And I feel like I was liked more and accepted more. And I think people can almost feel it in their own intuition that they don't fully know you. And I think sometimes you'll be surprised, like the right people for you, I feel like they do like accept you, they do change with you, they do level up with you, and they do support you doing that, you coming out and becoming more authentic. And the ones who don't, like, that's where you will never see them again. You know what I mean? That's where you grow out of them and you never see them again. But it's like crazy to have experienced like all 3 situations that you were talking about. And I think it's like something too that is ongoing, because we're only like in our 20s. We're gonna change a lot still. And it's kind of a scary thought, but it also really pushes me to get more comfortable with the fact that so many things are fleeting, and like that's okay. And that's okay. And really the only thing that's constant for me is me. Truly. Like the only thing that I can guarantee will be 1000% constant is just me and how I am with me. And that's all I can control. Everything else is like, it's up to universe, it's up to God, it's up to the higher self, to whoever you believe is out there orchestrating things. It's up to them. And I've learned to trust it, because time has gone by now since those relationships where I ascended, I never saw people again. And I can tell you that if they were to come back right now, I wouldn't even know how to talk to them. Like, I'm so different. But I was at that time. I literally would not even know what to talk to them about. Like I don't have anything in common with them anymore. And I'm like glad I don't. And I'm glad I don't. Because like who I am now, I like so much more than who I was 7 years ago, you know? So I think too that it's one of those things where like it sucks ass in the fucking moment. It sucks ass. Okay. It hurts like a bee. I've had to let go of a relationship and a best friend at the same time. Because I was changing and it wasn't in alignment with those people anymore, like at all. And this was, right around the time where I was still living in the Bay Area. So when I moved out, that's when I like cut people, never saw people again. And a lot of the relationships ended before I even left anyway. But yeah, I can say that like I look back at that now and it's really like it's a whole different time period. That's what that feels like. It feels like a whole different timeline. It feels like a whole different me. Like none of that love exists anymore. That person that I was doesn't exist anymore. That person that they were just doesn't exist anymore. And it like still gives me, the saddies. Okay. I'm a Cancer. I get nostalgic and I like think of people. I get reminded of them and stuff. But I think at the end of the day, when it changed a damn thing, and I'm grateful that someone was able to love that part of me that I couldn't love myself. You know what I mean? Like I'm grateful that they were there and they were perfect for who I was at the time.
That's a really beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So crazy. That almost makes me emo.
Yeah, I'm about to cry. Oh my God.
I want to be freaking emo because it hurt. It does hurt.
I'm looking back on all those people.
Yeah.
Who those people are in my life, people that I wish the best for them, but I don't miss being in a place where we align.
Yeah.
I don't want to align with that anymore,
I don't miss that at all. Thank you very much. Right. Yeah. But it's like, my ex best friend was like my partner in fucking crime. We were little scrappy, rowdy, annoying dishes together. Okay. Terrorizing the town together, terrorizing our exes together. Like that to me, relationship was so special though, because I've never been able to like fully let someone see like my shadow sides and have someone love my shadow sides at that. But then I healed my shadow sides and not there anymore, and there was nothing left for that person to love, and that I think is crazy. But I think if I were to see that person again and I would run into them, it would be a big hug. It would be like a holy fuck, like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I think for the real ones, like the love doesn't go away necessarily. Everything changes and maybe you're not with them anymore and you don't see them, you don't talk to them. But I think like the love is still there. And I feel that from her too, even just psychically. Like, I feel like she definitely loves me too, like to this day. And we ended on a bad note. Like I said, we were shadow side, like we were running on that vibration. And so we ended on a bad note. And we have each other fully blocked, fully blocked on all social medias and everything to this day. But I think that's truly like for our own peace. And I genuinely feel like if I saw that person again, it would be like hugging like the past. It's good, you know what I mean? It would literally be like a blast from the past, hugging the past. They're almost like a fucking relic of my past. And that's why like I can't have you with me. But I will always love you for that. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah. That's like a good segue into like just quickly want to run into this is the last topic we have, y'all. It's just like healing from those like toxic relationships or those relationships that like aren't for you anymore. Like, what are some tips you have for people who are going through that, or people who are trying to change out of that, evolve out of that? What are some tips you have?
Sometimes I try to start with empathy, because I know, and we talked about this during the astrology class, that I have all of those personal planets conjunct in my first house. This idea of self-improvement and self-development is like focal for my life. So when I see someone who doesn't have that, I try and understand, like, maybe it's just a different outlook and view on what they are trying to achieve and who they're trying to be. But with people who struggle and maybe want to change and just don't know how to get there and don't know how to help themselves, I do have some level of empathy for them, because I know that it can be hard to not know where to start, not know how to do it, or feel like there are things in your way stopping you. So I try to start with that when I'm forgiving someone who I ended a friendship with.
I think too, like, that's like a great question is like, where do you start, right? I think another thing to know, or another thing that's important is like being able to spot and know that you're even in a toxic relationship. Like, I think that's because for the longest time, I did not think that I was in a toxic relationship. For a long time, I did not think that I was toxic because this was a normal for both people in the relationship. Toxicity was normal for both of us, so we thought the relationship we have is normal. And it was crazy. Like, it wasn't, being when you realize all of a sudden that you're in a toxic relationship or you're in a toxic friendship or you are the toxic person, that's a big, big like eye opener right there. And like some things that I think, some like things to look out for so you're in a toxic relationship, especially with like friendships, I think is like one just like complete like disrespect, for like boundaries, energy, possessions, work, privacy, space. Definitely had like, friends calling me up 3 a.m. because they are fighting with their ex, like complete disrespect, right? Of just time, boundaries, space, and stuff like that. But to me, that was normal. And since I was like in toxic relationships, I was taught get the fuck up and answer that call at 3 a.m. and go be there for that person. Like that was like my side of the toxicity. And so I think too, just to like help anybody watching before we even get into tips would be like, help them like stop the red flags, right? Or help them spot it. Like what do you think is a red flag where if like that pops up, it's like, yo, no, mark that down.
I have one immediately off the top of my head. because you're mentioning, with friends, and during this past Leo Venus retrograde, I ended a friendship with someone who I've known since I was about 15 or 16. We were friends in high school, and then we stopped being friends, and then we reconnected over the past few years. But it just became one of those situations of a complete disrespect of energy and time. Without getting too deeply into it, she would come to me for help with stuff, and I would help her like with life stuff, like budgeting and money and finances. And then she would go around and make the same decisions that got her into that place in the first place. And then she would come back and ask me to help her pick up the pieces again. And I would always be there to help her pick up the pieces and lead her, And so I got to a point this year where I said, wait a minute. Yeah. Where's like the
respect, right?
I guess that's the only way to put it is like, you're asking me for all of this time and help and energy.
Yeah.
And what you're doing with it is you're taking it and like throwing it away. When I bring it up and when I start to set those boundaries, it turns into my fault, or it turns into, well, this is the reason, this is the reason, this is the reason, and it's never them that's the reason. Really, it's everything else that they can think of. So I think once you start to spot a sort of lack of balance of give and take and reciprocation and respect of the time and energy that you're asking someone for, if you're asking for it, then you should use it wisely. If you're asking for someone's help, accept the help. If you're asking for someone's advice, take the advice into account and utilize it as you can. But respect the fact that someone took the time to give that to you in the first place. So if you spot that someone's disrespecting you in that way, that's key number one, I think, to gauging how far you're willing to let that go.
1,000%. I think
you mentioned, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You mentioned balancing like the give and take, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I have trouble with identifying, because I'm a very giving person, and then I feel like people take advantage of that, and like it is so hard to realize when you're at a point of like, okay, I've given, like what are you giving in return? And so I've had to, especially because like in my profession, I'm in a helping profession, I work with people all the time where my job is giving. So I'm like, in my personal relationships, I've come to realize reciprocation is absolutely a must. Like I can't have friends and stuff in my life if they're not pouring into me just as much as I'm doing to them, because I already give so much of myself, like for my work. And I don't know if it's always intentional, that people do that. It could very well be, you know, a very conscious decision that they want to take advantage of the giving person. And other times it could be that they just don't see reciprocation maybe in the same way. And so maybe, you know, that might be something that could be fixed with the conversation. But more often than not, I just realize like I have to shy away from that because I don't know. And sometimes I'm like, do I even care to have a conversation? Like, why is that something I should bring up to you if you supposedly care about me as much as I care about you? And it's hard to discern like the difference between somebody taking advantage and somebody just not knowing how to engage in a relationship in that way.
Yeah, 1000%. Do you guys have any other like red flags you want to throw in? Friendships, relationships, just anything that you feel like might help somebody recognize?
I would say like invalidation of feelings, invalidation of your experiences and the things that you go through, possibly minimizing things like, you know, you're excited about this new job you got, a house you got, and they're like, oh, it ain't all that, you know, like it could be better and whatever else. Like that's definitely not somebody that you need to have around. So yeah, big hater energy right there.
Yeah, like there's this thing I'll notice between like girl and girl friendships that I feel like is a little weird, a little toxic, but I'll like catch it sometimes or I'll see it sometimes, and it's like weird little like dominance battles kind of go down. It's like, you know, somebody's saying like, oh, like I'm so happy about like my haircut or blah blah blah, and the other friend's like, yeah, the haircut's all right. Like, I think you would have looked better like this though. But, like, yeah, your haircut's cute. It's just like
taking
so
away from
weird.
it.
Yeah.
It's almost like the girl version of like negging, where it's like this tiny little undercut, but it's like it's so subtle that like you can't really call it out.
Can't clock it almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be used in like over time. I've seen it. It's like it starts subtle, small, but then it turns into like full on embarrassing you, or like turning people against you, or it turns into like straight up raining on somebody's parade. Like it starts small and then you keep letting it happen because you're like, it's small, whatever, she loves me, that's my sister, that's my friend, she must love me. But yeah, over time I've just observed it becomes a bigger problem. Definitely within my own personal friendships, I've dealt with just like a friend that would just constantly rain on my parade, like could not let me have my flowers, could not let me like have my moment, would literally rain on the parade every time. And it was just like yeah, it was just so weird because in other areas she would be so sweet. But I'm like, it took me a long time to realize, and it wasn't until, because we were roommates, until I like moved out of that house where I really was like reflecting on it, and I was like, no, like every time she had the chance to like rain it. And it was so subtle, so I didn't even like realize it until I'm fully moved out of that house. And then when I went to set up a conversation with her about that, full on ghosted me, blocked me. And then I go on Twitter, and our mutuals, there are two mutuals we have, they blocked me too. And I didn't, what? That can't be a coincidence. You know, what's interesting is there's two mutuals that I like introduced that friend to. And so I was just like, wait, we were literally friends first. We've been friends for a hot minute, never had problems. Why am I blocked?
Right.
And I like go to text them, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, because I'm blocked on Twitter. So I go to text them, and I come to find out that this friend has been like slowly like turning people against me as she's doing little like dominant things like raining on the parade or embarrassing me or like intimidating me. It was also in the background like being used to, like turn two people against me. And it was the craziest, most like gaslightiest like moment ever. I was literally sobbing and crying for like 2 days because I'm just like, what the fuck did I do? It was
isn't it the most bizarre thing when people try to get other people to turn against you?
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre.
It's like it's so sick. Like it's like really
campaigning
so sick
against you, like using those people to bog you down further.
I see it so much with Scorpio women a lot, Martian women too, like Aries women a lot. And I think it's because people do not, especially sometimes other women, unfortunately, do not like when other women are like assertive, or when other women are like Martian on the other, and they're like in their yang. sometimes they don't like that and they want to put that power like down,
Mm-hmm.
or they like turn that fire off, or they want to like, you know, do it. And it's just like it really stems from, I think, an internal thing where it's like, if this person's shining, I don't shine as bright. Or if like this person like, yeah, like doing well, then I'm not, like, it's like because of them that I'm not doing well or something like that. It's like an internal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, it's the trippiest fucking thing. Like this time I'm asking all the questions. I have no answers. Like literally like just like that was a mind, like my mind was blown. I was so caught off guard. I did not see it coming. Like that's what was crazy, is like just being caught off guard. Like I fully was like wanting to have a conversation and apologize, right? And forgive, whatever, and mend the relationship, make it, you know, last. And I was like so down for that. And she's like, yeah, I'm down for that too. Like we'll hang out, we'll meet up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, down to it, just fucking blocked. Just full on blocked. And it's just like, I don't like to, or like a pet peeve for me, and it should also be like a red flag, is like when people don't give you like the opportunity to like, you know, fix it, or like at the time I was like, what did I do? And if I did something, I want to fix it. I look back at it now, like I didn't do shit. I will admit when I'm fucked up, and I look back at it, I didn't do shit. But I like it. I think that is like yeah, like a really big red flag is when people don't offer you the space to correct yourself, or when people don't offer you the space to redeem yourself, because I think like people are worth that, especially if you love them. Like they're worth extending grace to, you know. But yeah, so big red flag there's your friend. If your friend doesn't extend you grace, if your friend you know, slowly turns other friends against you, and does this whole smear campaign against behind your back, okay, red flag. That's not your friend. Okay.
I had an attempted smear campaign, but I came out victorious in the end.
Congratulations.
For you.
You can't get people to hate me. You really tried.
Good. It's funny because I think like that roommate is not friends with any of the two mutuals anymore. Like they all attacked each other.
Not surprising.
It backfires.
Yeah,
it backfires. It really does.
Backfire, and they just destroyed each
other. That just brought to mind that Spider-Man meme with all the Spider-Mans pointing at each other.
Yeah, literally. I was like, oh, look at those two turning against each other. Not
karmic justice. There it is.
That's what I thought. And it was crazy. Like they both had me blocked. This is fully on Twitter, right? Like, let's get the fuck off the platform, please, and have a conversation. But okay. They had me blocked. And then the next day, one of my other friends I was just talking to about it sent me a screenshot, and it's like them two hanging out. And like we live 8 hours away from like the other friend, because remember, this is my ex-roommate. So I'm just like, how long was this going? I feel cheated on. I feel fully cheated on right now. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's a betrayal. For sure.
Straight up. But yeah, so that's tough. And I feel like too, when you're like ganged up on, like you really think like, fuck it must be me. Yeah,
but that's part of the design of the betrayal too, right? Is to like isolate you and make you think you're the problem. And that's what makes you also the perfect victim of this kind of betrayal too, is that you're someone who's susceptible to that. Because I bet if you were one of the other girls, like if she targeted one of the other girls, they wouldn't take it that same way. They would be like, y'all are toxic as fuck, and call them out, because they were not the perfect victim of that crime, right? And it's like it's kind of a weird like segue, but I feel like people have intuition. Like everyone has intuition, right? And everyone uses it in different ways, and it's something that like you can use for good or you can use for evil. And I think toxic people will intuitively seek out people who make good victims for their manipulation, for their abuse. And like it seems like she knew who would be the most like susceptible to that kind of abuse.
Because they try to see through the cracks and see where they can slip in and see where those foundations are weak, so they can kind of wiggle them a little bit, make them wobbly.
The business side in me is like, she knew her ideal client.
She
knew her ideal client. Oh God, it was me.
Not client.
Yeah, I was like, oh, damn it. I fell for that. No, it was crazy. Whatever. And you know what's funny is we knew each other in high school and I didn't like her. I should have trusted my intuition. I was like, no, she's probably like, I was probably wrong. Like, people change. She's different now.
No, baby.
Trusted the first time.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy? She might have been like holding on to something from way back then. Like, let me get back to this bitch.
She seems like the type.
Yeah, like high school me must have did something. I don't know. I don't, but
got the last chocolate milk in high school, and she didn't get her chocolate milk, and she's been holding on to that moment this time.
I caught her in the lunch line, and I took the last chicken sandwich. She's still holding on to that moment. No. That was hilarious. You know that okay, so I'm watching Pretty Little Liars right now, right? And it's just,
I love that show.
That show really like reminded me how the past things you do can bite you in the ass.
Yeah,
for sure. Karma for real.
Yeah.
Karma is for real.
Don't play about it.
I do not play with her. I don't. I'm completely surrendered to that. I've learned, and it's only because Karma has whooped my ass before. So
don't fight the flow, man.
Instantaneously, she can operate.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's like again, I'm like so grateful to piece of shit me because I think that's like why I'm a good healer. You know what I mean? I think that's why I'm like. I've acquired knowledge because it's like it was do or die. It was like acquire the knowledge or stay that person. You know what I mean? So I really like, think again, everything works out for a reason, for sure. Yeah. And I think
it's always gonna push you, you know, to just like it's just think it's always gonna push you to your next evolutionary phase, I think.
I think too, it's like really healthy to take a second and like think your past selves. We spend a lot of time like, you know, dogging on our past selves because we don't want to be them anymore. But I do think it's like very helpful when you take like 5 minutes to just find something to be thankful for, you know, in terms of your past self. Like,
especially if you were operating from a position of like survival, like that aspect of you got you through something really fucking hard. And like I feel like we hold on to the parts that like weren't that, you know what I mean? Like there were moments of survival and we conveniently put that out of our minds and we just think about how we made mistakes and we think about how we hurt people or how we didn't do the best for ourselves. But it's like, you need to look at the bigger picture. Like that part of you was born out of survival and got you through something that you shouldn't have had to go through in the first place. So that's a badass bitch. Even if it was your inner child, that's a badass little bitch. So recognize it, you know?
Yeah. I love that point.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Like the past years, like they were doing what they had to do. You know what I mean? They did what they had to do with the cards they were dealt. And that's all anyone is ever doing, you know, when you really.
And now we're all here.
Yeah. And now
we're all here because of that.
Yeah.
So thank you to all you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back at you, Liliana.
Oh.
Stop. I love when girls get together for podcasts.
Girl podcasts are so much better than boy podcasts.
I'm always telling my man that I'm like, yo, Girl World is way more fun. Like I know you guys like make fun of it, but it's way more fun.
We just talk about better things.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, yeah, I love it over here. I'm not going to. Don't take me, man world. Stay right here.
Please no.
I want no part.
I want no part of it. No. Okay. Do you all have you know, this will be our final prompt would be just tips you have for the people who are healing, who are trying to, you know, forgive and apologize, for the people who are trying to move on from those toxic friendships, who are maybe trying to find their sisters as well and their, you know, group. Like what tips do you have for people who are going through that change right now?
Have grace for yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's a big one. No, you're fine. I was gonna say my biggest thing was kind of like focusing inward on myself, and because I had a similar situation to you, Tania, where I lost, you know, a best friend, and a boyfriend at that time. And so then I really felt, and that was the best friend of like forever too. So that shit was hard. And then I just felt like I was, by myself. Like I had lost two of the people I had known for the longest that had known me the best. And I was just like, what the fuck am I going to do from here? So like focusing just on myself, trying to figure out like what I wanted out of my life outside of these people, and building myself back up was a really big thing, to not internalize the things that these people had done to me, to not let myself feel like shit, like, oh, maybe I could have done this, I could have, whatever. It is what it is. Everything played out how it did. I can't go back and change it. So accepting things as they are, having grace for yourself, patience with yourself, and I think just really like pouring love back into yourself is a big thing, because instead of like immediately going out and seeking that from somebody else, like you really have to get that from yourself in order to be able to move forward in a better way. And I think building up your trust of yourself, so that when you go out and you do encounter new people, that you have a better you have more faith in yourself to not put yourself back in those similar situations. You already been through it before, you're not going to go through it again. Like just have convictions of how you're going to carry yourself forward, and then know that when people come around and they're not treating me right, I'm moving the fuck on. Like there's too many people in the world to be hung up on, a couple of people that aren't doing right by you. So that would be my biggest thing, is like pouring back into yourself, and building yourself back up, a strong foundation from which you can move forward.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Snaps to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I've been through some shit, y'all. So I'm like that, and it's just like over my whole childhood, like that, being in survival mode, that was not a focus of, deciding what I'm a fucking kid. I wasn't thinking about, how things are going to be. And then all of that happened in like 5-6 years ago. So I was still reaching early adulthood, and then figuring like, okay, well, who the hell am I now? Like, trying to figure out who I am without those people. And then also deciding who I want to be. Like, you don't have to, if you were that toxic person, you don't have to stay that person. You can always pick yourself up and do better. Like every day is a new day. And you don't have to have the shame or guilt of any of it. Just everything. I feel like acceptance is the biggest thing. Accept, those people for who they were, accept yourself for who you were at that time, and be able to move forward from that in a better way.
Snaps again.
Yeah. More.
Period.
Yeah.
Anyone else have some tips? I have a tip. I think that if you're going through, changes with people, with yourself, you're needing to forgive, you're needing to whatever. I think one of the biggest lessons one of the biggest tips I would have is to learn as many lessons as you can from like a shitty situation. Like, do not waste a shitty situation. Like, you can really gain a lot of knowledge about yourself and what it is you need and what it is you don't want. And I think it's okay to sit in the feeling of like being upset. It's okay to sit in the feeling of like, not wanting to forgive somebody, or it's okay to sit in the feeling of like whatever, because I think that feeling is just confirmation that you need a boundary there. That means that's confirmation that you need a boundary there. And that I think is like one of the most valuable things you can take from shitty situations. It's like learn this lesson so you don't like protect yourself better, next time you face something like this, or you can avoid it or have a better boundary around something like this. And I think it's also important too, like let's say you're trying to ask for forgiveness from somebody, is to definitely take accountability for every part that you've played, and that I don't get stuck in the shame cycle either, because you can't heal yourself or other people when you're operating in shame. Like it's just really hard to do that. You have to like forgive yourself too. So you're maybe apologizing to another person, asking for forgiveness, but you also have to find a way to forgive yourself too. And I think like, what you can really get from that is just like, you can really learn how you can better support yourself in future, like better support yourself in future friendships, future relationships, better support yourself as you change, better forgive yourself. You can just learn how to take care of yourself way better from shitty situations. So Yeah, I think too, like people people are in a shitty situation, they automatically think they're in a hole that they can't crawl out of. I'm a big believer that you can crawl out of any hole, right? You can. So if for anyone who's listening who's like, will I ever change? Will I be a better person? Will I be able to forgive myself? Like you can. I definitely think you can. You just have to stay devoted to that, and you'll find your way. You will always find your way. So, and yeah. Anyone else have any other tips they want to share?
I've got something.
Yeah.
I think like if you're struggling in any kind of interpersonal relationship, I think like stripping it down to the objective basics is really helpful. So like, what needs do I have unmet? What are my desires? And how am I actively acting against receiving those things? So whether it's a lack of boundaries, whether it's acting out of integrity, whether it's acting out of alignment, how are you contributing to that and what needs to change there? And that should very much be a process that's about you and not with any specific person in mind. It's really getting down to like the very basic level of what you need and want in order to be fulfilled in an interpersonal relationship of any kind.
I love that. I love that idea of get down to the basics. I was just thinking the other day of like how valuable just like simple wisdom is, and basically, and like sometimes we overcomplicate things and we psychoanalyze things, like we really like make it so much worse than it is, or they solve out so much more. So yeah, I love that idea of just bringing it back to the basics. Really cool.
Yeah, you saying that brought to mind. So for people who are in like abusive situations and healing from things, that are a lot heavier, that is something as far as like getting back to meeting your basic needs. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you drinking water? Like trying to take care of yourself in that way. And so when when I in the past and whenever these things come up for me presently, when I struggle in that way, that's pretty much what I have to go back to, and then work up from there. Then I can work in, back to bringing joy in my life and all these other things. But it really boils down to those basic things, because if you like if you're dehydrated, you're gonna shrivel up. You're not sleeping, like you're not gonna be in a good mental state to even process things, to be able to move forward. So focusing on those things really help, and then you can cultivate like where you're going from there.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. I love that a lot. And also for people who are like healing, or you're in a relationship that you're trying to like move forward, in terms of like you forgave that person and you want to like try to move forward with them. I think it's also like not a race to see who can heal first. I think that's like important too. Like, take your time healing, heal on your own terms, and give the other person the same grace. Even if they are the one that fucked up, it's still a two-way street to fix the relationship, and it'll take them time too. And as long as they're not continuing to hurt you, I think they deserve grace as they're trying, they're truly trying. And so yeah, I think it's important, like, give yourself permission to take however long you need to take, and to take as much time and to go on your own pace, but to also extend the grace to the other person as well.
Yeah,
that's tough. That's like it's really tough to be on the other side of like an apology and having to extend grace to someone who did hurt you. But it takes like a really big, special, powerful person to do that. So
for sure.
Yeah. All right. Do you guys have any other tips and stuff before?
I think I've about summed it up pretty well.
I've talked a lot.
Yeah.
I think everyone hit all the most important points. I mean, I just think it's important to have as much grace for yourself as possible, but to also keep yourself in check of when your own choices aren't helping you. In regards to just healing in general, and forgiveness, both for yourself and for other people. Don't force it if it doesn't feel right yet, and just let it come to you when it needs to come to you, because then it'll flow much easier, I think. So have grace for yourself if you're unable to forgive someone immediately, and have grace for that person. And if you can, if it's, if what they did is, warranting that, but Yeah, just grace. I love that word as a rule to apply through life, is to just move with intention, but let yourself step back when you need to.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow. This was such an awesome discussion.
It was.
This was kind of
The time really flew. That was insane. I can't believe how quickly that went by.
I'm glad it came though, because at first I'm like, I don't know if I'm feeling it. I didn't write anything. I don't know what I'm gonna talk about. Shut up anyway.
I had planned to wing it.
Yeah, I thought it would be mostly like a spectator, but this was nice.
Right.
This was very nice.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think this is like going to help a lot of people who are going through these things. And it was like really fun too. It was
really fun.
Where will you be posting the podcast to?
YouTube.
Right okay, now. Cool.
And I'll save it in case we end up going on like Spotify or like the podcast app or whatever.
Spotify.
That'd be cool. It'll be interesting to see other people's like comments and contributions to the discussion as well.
I'm excited for that for sure.
Yeah. So definitely send the link out whenever you get your editing done, get it posted.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm trying to pick the drop date right now, and I'm using electional astrology to do that.
Hey,
I'm trying to okay, which date? Yeah, I'm trying to find. I want to do it December 1. And it'll be cool because we'll have a couple podcasts pre-filmed by then.
Yeah,
it's gonna keep me on a better schedule in terms of posting, knowing I have like couple
like backups just in case.
Yeah.
So that's like the game plan. So we'll still have like a podcast next week, and next week, even though you guys aren't seeing it post yet, it's gonna be like getting edited and being like basically ready to go live.
Okay.
Let's go. Yeah, I'm excited. Day one, and I want to make it cute. I want to like tell make a little like little flyer or something. Like, hey, we got a podcast.
And you could do like you could do those like reels on Instagram or whatever, where it's like you could have the poster, but it could have like an audio overlay of a clip of it. You know, if anything sticks out.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I'm gonna chew my dinner.
Yeah. Hey, when I finish it though, I'll send it to you guys. Like on unlisted or something. So you guys can always like watch it ahead of time. Like,
ooh, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely that way you guys don't have to like wait still like want to watch it. But yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. I'm really happy with this. And I think this is something that'll stick for sure. It's really fun. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a brilliant idea, and I had so much fun.
Yeah, me too. I'll let you guys enjoy your night because I know it's like 10 o'clock for right now.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock for me.
This is like prime time for me, but it's gamer time now. Okay,
I'm about to go.
Headphones are out.
There you go. There you go. Literally about to go like grocery shopping for Thanksgiving right now.
It's e-girl time.
Hell yeah.
Well, y'all have a great night. It was great talking to you.
Too, guys.
You too. Thank you guys so much.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.